Hello, folks, and welcome to today's episode of the Hospitable Hosts podcast. Today, I'm speaking to Shawn Moore, the founder of Vodyssey, the mastermind group for short-term rental investors. Shawn has been a leader in the short-term rental industry for over 2 decades, launching his first rental in 2006. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Okay, Shawn. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome, Miles. Appreciate you having me.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you. Thank you. So, Shawn, want to get straight into it. You've obviously been into real estate from quite a young age. So, where did that passion come from, and how did you kind of end up getting into it in the first place?
Yeah, it's I'm showing my age a little bit. I've been full-time real estate investing. It's all it's ever paid my bills for going on 26 years now. And so I got introduced to it really early on, right out of college. I was actually working as a sales rep for a steel service company, and right next to my office was this guy that kept showing up and he would come to his office next door in a helicopter every day, and he would that's how he'd commute to his office. And I thought, the heck does this guy do? And it ended up going and finally working up the nerve to just go figure out, kind of be a little nosy and figure out what he did. Well, he was a real estate investor, he said. And I thought, what does that mean, right? Like, real estate investor. But whatever he was doing, I thought, well, he's got to figure it out, because he doesn't drive to work. He flies to work, and looked kind of fun. And so he ended up being a author and a speaker. And I went to a couple of his seminars and got very interested in what he was doing. Started kind of following him around as a mentor, and the rest is history, really. I started off doing fix and flips for about 6 or 7 years early on in my career, and ultimately, I quit my. I did my first deal right after I met him, probably maybe 60 days after I met him, and made almost as much as I made in a year working at my full-time job. And so that's when I pulled the plug and started doing that. So I bounced around a lot of different asset classes. And so started off in fix and flip, moved into build jobs and development deals, started buying some long-term rentals, did small multifamily stuff. I didn't do ever really a lot of commercial or big multifamily, but back in 2006, I bought my first short-term rental. So way before it was kind of as popular as it is today, I got introduced to this new world of short-term rentals before Airbnb was even a thing. Vrbo was around, but we would primarily rent our properties on the weekends. It was a little mountain lake town in Utah, and we'd rent it on local classifieds and Craigslist ads. And it was a pretty fun little asset class. Didn't think a whole heck of a lot to it. I was still doing a lot of development deals. And when the crash happened, the real estate crash happened in 2008 through 10, I started, a lot of my development deals were going, belly up, and we were doing some different things, and we're struggling a little bit, except for this asset, this home that we had as a vacation rental kept doing better and better and better. And even though we lost value on the home during that time, it was going down in value, we kept making more money on it. And so by the time things kind of rebounded back in 2011, 2012, I started looking back and saying, it was interesting how that performed. And then that's when we really started getting very interested in vacation homes, and kind of the rest is history. And we went all in, and really, I haven't bought any other asset class since 2014 now.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
And so what does kind of that portfolio look like today? Like, how big is short-term rentals as part of your whole kind of
Yeah,
portfolio?
so I almost always keep a portfolio somewhere between 6 and 8 properties. So what we try to do is we're really paying close attention to our return on equity as investors. And so over the years, we probably bought and sold probably 40 to 50 short-term rentals, but we usually keep somewhere between that 6 to 8 portfolio. Right now, we're in the process of working on our biggest development or project in the short-term rental space to date. It's a 21 unit development in Broken Bow it's a tiny home development that we're putting together. And so, but most of my up till now, it's always just been 6 to 8 single family homes that we're constantly looking at maximizing and upgrading. Usually we keep them for around that 5 to 7 year period, and then we roll up the equity to something bigger and better.
Nice, that's amazing. And are you kind of spread out those properties? Are they all kind of in Utah?
Yeah, no, I spread out pretty significantly. I've got 3 here in Utah, but we've got them in Georgia, in Tennessee, and Florida. We look all over the place. We're looking in Texas right now. Then the one we're doing in Broken Bow, and so Normally we're pretty spread out. Even the ones in Utah, they're not next to each other. They're in different areas, like down by Zion National Park, up in the mountains. And so we've got different areas in Utah. And so, and I think that there's pros and cons to having kind of a very localized or regionalized
Mm,
portfolio. And because there's economies of scale in management and your team members and everything else, which is awesome to have them all kind of located in one place. And then there's some pros and cons of having them spread out, right? We don't have the
yeah.
economies of scale. We have to have different team members in each of those areas. But we also have the diversification of different seasons. And, if something happens weather-wise, and shuts an area down, our
Mm,
entire portfolio is not shut down. So I've always enjoyed having my portfolio spread out. We do enjoy using our properties. I only buy properties that I enjoy using. And so, we truly look at them as lifestyle assets. And so we don't buy at this stage in the game just a means to an end of a good investment, right? We look for
yeah.
those properties that we want to use, and I don't have any reason to use three properties in the same area. So that's one of my motivators to have them spread
Yeah.
out.
Nice. And so that's quite interesting. Obviously, I guess you're picking properties and markets based on what, like you say, you'd be happy to stay in. What are maybe some of the other things that you think about there? Because I assume it's not just where you'd be happy to stay, but it's also thinking about, I guess, competitiveness of that market and some kind of other criteria there as well.
Yeah, there's obviously, I always tell people naturally you're going to be in the short-term rental world. If you want to go visit, I always tell people start with an area you want to go visit, right? Because if you do, somebody else will as well, because that's usually a good indicator of demand. We
Yeah.
naturally, instinctively are going to pick areas with high demand because we want to go there. Other people are probably going to.
Yeah.
But it's a data-driven business, right? We make decisions based on data and not just, hey, I want to own a home in this market. And so then we really have to look at the investability of the market. We're running the numbers as far as, and the big ratio we're looking at is, okay, how much money is the consumer spending? And how much are they spending on the type of property I'm looking at? Maybe it's a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, whatever it is. How much money is being spent in that market? And what is my acquisition cost? And that ratio has to be favorable. I happen to live in the mountains in Utah. It's in Park City, Utah is a very, most people know where Park City, Utah is, or they've heard of it
Yeah.
at least, right? It's a Class A ski resort town. It's very expensive to buy into. People visit here all the time, but that ratio is not very favorable for investors because the acquisition cost is so high versus the revenue that you can generate. And so because of that, it's not a real investable market to us, even though it checks a lot of boxes as being a really Class A resort destination market, right? But so you would
Mm,
assume, that's going to be a good short-term rental market. So those are the things that we're really starting to look at on the surface is how can I actually make money with these properties is really what that question is answering.
yeah. Nice. And then thinking about kind of, yeah, so making money with those properties, I think something key is always kind of like making a listing stand out when you're in a market that might have a bit of competition. And what are some of the things that you think about when you're trying to, yeah, market those properties and make sure that you are getting that, short-term rental revenue?
So one of the things that we just try to scream from the rooftops is having investors understand the business we're actually in, which is the experience business, right? And saying, okay, most short-term rentals are very much a mom and pop investor
Mm,
industry. You don't have a lot of institutional investors coming in and buying a whole bunch of short-term rentals. And so institutional investors really understand that those types of business concepts, consumer behavior, all those different things. Well, just individual investors, a lot of times we think we're selling a property. We think we're in the property business and we try to put these beautiful properties out and we furnish them like model homes. And all of a sudden we think that's going to be enough. The issue is our neighbor has the exact same proximity as us and they have another model home. And now that short-term rentals are as popular as they are, in our market, there's really no differentiation. And so what you have to be thinking of is, okay, if I am in the experience business, how do I enhance that? How do I create an immersive experience with my property? And it has a lot to do with the proximity, but also, are you able to select who your actual target audience is? Like I always am a big proponent of investors to really niche down who their target audience is, because then it's much easier to create this immersive experience for this specific person or this very specific avatar. I had a property up by Yellowstone National Park and it's on a lake up there, very popular lake, 10 minutes from the gates of Yellowstone National Park, tons of visitors. But all my
Mhm.
neighbors had these beautiful $1 million lake homes as well. And they all were, they were set up beautifully. Everybody would be happy to go visit them. And ours was as well. And so even though they're all really nice properties in really nice areas, we all kind of blend in together. And so what I chose to do is say, I'm going to go after fly fishermen. And I'm going to say, hey, listen, we're really within 10 to 15 minutes away from 5 blue ribbon trout streams, and we're going to ignore all the Yellowstone traffic and everything else, and we're just going to say, hey, listen, if you want to come fish the West and you want to fish
Mhm.
the top rivers in the Western United States for fly fishing trout, here's, like, we've got the setup for you. And we would have wader drying stations, and we'd have rod carriers, and we'd have drift boats ready for them, and we had this entire experience just for fly fishermen at this cabin. Well, what happened is my property started making more and more money than my neighbors. In fact, when we ended up toward the end, we were making, our average nightly rate was $1,500 a night. My neighbor's average nightly rate was $700 a night. So we were making double what they were making. My guests who stayed at our property, they knew they could stay at my neighbor's property for 700, and they didn't
Yeah.
want to. And all we did was speak directly to that group, and we put some minor things, didn't cost us a whole lot extra, into this experience. And it was this immersive fly fishing experience, and we had the right amenities for them, we had the right setup for them, we spoke their language, and it became a waitlist only property. If you didn't book, that's like, if you came in the week of, Memorial Day week, and you didn't
Mhm.
book it before you left, it would be gone, you couldn't get back in, right? And so we just, every year, it was booked a year in advance, and we were making double what our neighbors were making, just by making the tweak of picking a target audience and creating an experience for them, and like where they felt like, it was a very personalized, a different experience than what everybody else was offering. And I just challenge investors to do that on a regular basis,
Mhm.
because it's almost instantly will raise the performance of your property overnight.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that 5-star guest experience, like you say. It's really kind of going above and beyond, and kind of having that niche and kind of owning it, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome to hear. Just out of interest on that, because I think you kind of touched on repeat bookings of people wanting to come back. Are you kind of exclusively doing kind of bookings through Airbnb? Do you have your own direct booking website? How are you kind of doing that today?
Yeah, we have our own direct booking website, and so we do try to do a lot of direct bookings,
Hmm.
and then but it's a slow burn. I always tell people direct bookings are not going to replace your income off of the OTAs
Yeah.
for probably if you're doing a really good job, probably 2 to 3 years, right? There's
Hmm.
no reason to not figure out how to maximize on the OTAs. They've got millions of eyeballs. They spend tons of money on marketing and advertising. So a lot of your consumers are there, and there's a trust factor as well. When a consumer goes to a platform like that and books my property, they trust that they're going to get what they're paying for and what we're advertising, or else I'm not going to be on that platform. Direct bookings, there's a trust recession, right? And they're nervous. Is this a scam? Am I gonna, so you're always fighting this uphill battle with direct bookings. Doesn't mean you don't want to do them, but also I always tell investors, direct bookings are not going to solve your income problem if you're not doing well on the OTAs. And so, in fact, it's much harder to get bookings on direct bookings than it is on the OTAs. And if you do a great job and you stay top of mind with your guests, and you start to get that snowball building, because you've done, like with my fly fishing property, they wanted to come back because they had a great
Hmm.
experience. But it takes time to get that going. And so we absolutely run down both roads. But I think the big misconception is, well, if I understand direct bookings really quickly, and I start to spend money on advertising or whatever it is, I can replace the income on the OTAs. That's very, very difficult to do. And it usually takes 2 to 3 years, even if you're going to be able to do it, on a very high level with direct bookings, in my experience.
Hmm. Nice. Okay. Cool. And you kind of talked as you've spoken about kind of the properties and your business. You've said we a couple of times, so I assume it's not just you managing the shops and rentals. Would love to understand kind of what your team looks like. Do you have a group of people helping you out? Is it virtual assistants, property manager? How does that look?
Yeah, so I have a property manager on every one of my properties. I don't manage any of my own properties, and so I never have, actually. And so we
Hmm.
have, within our Vodyssey family, of our mentorship program and stuff, we have a lot of self managers. A lot of people use Hospitable, a great
Yeah.
platform to be able to use. to manage your own properties. I don't. I never have. So yeah, my team consists of my property manager, which really then they have their own localized teams as well. But, when I refer to we, many times on the investment side is my wife, and we're tied at the hip in the team when it comes to this stuff. But when it comes to managing our properties, property management is the Achilles heel of the business. And for those investors like me that
Hmm.
don't manage our own properties and we're looking to scale our portfolio by buying more properties and then handing off the operations to somebody else,
Yeah.
it's a it is a painful process, to say the least, to try to find the right property manager and or co-host. Now there's a lot of great co-hosts out there that we team up with on some of our properties, but it's never shocking to me that the owner operators that do self-manage typically do a better job than a lot of the property managers out there. And so we weed through a lot on the interview process. It's like anybody that's ever had to hire somebody, right? You go through
Hmm.
all those resumes, and none of us like it, but you really have to take your time on that property management side, because the right ones are worth their weight in gold. They're
Yeah.
amazing partners. They're one of the most important partners that you will have in this business. And then they have their teams of cleaners and maintenance and really the hosts there, right? Whether it's them or a team member that is really kind of their hospitality manager as well. Those are super important in this game, because in the experience business, that is a huge part of how that guest feels when they check in, check out, communicate with you, is that because if you're not doing it yourself and using somebody like a Hospitable to kind of really, I mean, if you're not using those types of tools now, you're crazy. I mean, back in the day that you could use that excuse. There's no excuse now. You use those property
Hmm.
management software solutions, and you guys have been around for a long time doing it. And it makes that job of communicating, delivering a great experience really great for your guest.
Nice. Awesome. And you kind of touched on Vodyssey briefly there. So want to kind of give you the opportunity to kind of talk a bit more about that. Exactly what is it? How do kind of hosts learn a bit more about it and get involved?
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, Vodyssey, you just go to vodyssey.com, VODYSSEY.com. Vodyssey I wrote a book called What the Hell is a Lifestyle Asset back and it
Mm.
really took me, I didn't publish it until the end of 2019, first of 2020. And but I started writing it in 2017, and while I was writing it, I was trying to put together my process, and because I had a lot of people, because we had been in this game for a while, saying, hey, show us how to do this. If anybody that's been around for a minute before COVID, a lot of people were introduced to short-term rentals after COVID, but they were really gaining a lot of steam from about 2016, 17 up to 2019. They were really becoming a lot more mainstream at that stage. And then obviously COVID just threw fuel on that fire overnight. But it
Hmm.
was during that time I was writing a book saying, hey, I wanted to show like 50 people how we did this stuff. And then I launched this little mentorship program for 10 people, and thought the same thing. Maybe I'll teach 50 people how to, my view of the short-term rental investing world, right, at the time. And lo and behold, it just, and COVID was, because of that phenomenon of everybody getting introduced to it at that same time. It was right when I was launching everything, and we became one of the top short-term rental investing education companies just overnight. I mean, it was now, and you know, we've had a lot of fun. We have almost 3,000 active members in our group.
Oh.
It's the largest, to my knowledge, it's the largest short-term rental investing group in the nation of paid investors. Right? I know it's
Hmm.
not a free group. It's fairly expensive to be a part of. So it's fairly expensive mastermind, but it's a very intentional mastermind, and it's been really fun because it keeps, for me, being investing in this for a long time, we kind of started this process and this blueprint. It's not my blueprint anymore, right? There's so many successful investors in that group now, and it keeps our finger on the pulse of what's going on. We're able to kind of really set the bar in, I mean, I think we have, our Vodyssey family has the number one property in over 100 markets now across the US.
Oh.
The number one revenue property covering over 100 markets, and just continues to grow. And so it's nice to be able to be a part of what's going on and how that's kind of, and it's really just dialing in the fundamentals. At the end of the day, the processes are, pretty fundamental. The execution is you pay attention to those details, but when you're around that many people that are operating at a high level, it's a pretty fun process, or a pretty fun group to be around, because I could never gain that collective experience on my own. You couldn't put it as much hours. You don't have that many properties. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of properties of case studies, and so we see what works and what doesn't work, and when we hope to share that as well with everybody out there.
Nice, awesome. So obviously, people can go and join Vodyssey. They can learn more on your website.
Yeah, go to the website. Yeah, you can get the book. You can, like, I have a podcast called Vacation Rental Revolution, so you listen to that. You can grab a copy of the book. You can't just join the group on that. It is one of those kind of invitation only type groups. So, but you can book a call to chat with me, and I'm kind of the gatekeeper of it. And so we have a 45-minute strategy call, and we'll talk to each other and just make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we can actually help you do what you're trying to do. And if not, we're going to try our best to point you in the right direction.
Nice. I like that. That sounds like a good approach. Cool.
Yeah.
So maybe before we finish, I think just one final question. So maybe a taste of some of the advice in the group. If there's one thing you had to tell kind of a new investor, first time short-term rental, either it's kind of a top tip to think about, or it's kind of like a common pitfall to avoid. What's one thing that you would tell a short-term rental investor?
Yeah. The number one thing I'm telling them right now is make sure you budget enough money to get to the finish line. And what I mean by that is, because we are in the experience business and we're not just in the property business, it takes more than just buying a great property in a great area. As much as I love short-term rentals, one of the drawbacks is it is capital intensive on the front end. And because you can get very creative on purchasing a property, you can get very creative. Maybe you do arbitrage or co-hosting and you partner with somebody that's doing it. At the end of the day, the reason that we really dominate the markets that we go into is because we budget enough money on the back end to create these immersive experiences. And by creating those immersive experiences, what we do is we put ourselves into a category of one, right? There's nobody else in our market that's doing it many times. Even in your top markets, you elevate yourself to where you eliminate a lot of the competition. But at that same time what you're doing is you're also giving the consumer a reason to pay you more money, because it's a really tough game if it's a race to the bottom and just competing on price, right? And so the biggest mistake I see people make is they budget for a down payment. They budget for a little bit of furnishings, or they buy a furnished property and they think I'm going to put it on and it's going to perform really well because it's a really nice property in a really nice area. And that's not enough. There's too many other really nice properties in really nice areas right next to you. And so what people are not doing is budgeting that next chunk of money to create these immersive experiences. And that could be great outdoor space. That could be, and it's not just buying more amenities, right? It's really creating this experience, like I was talking to you about with the fly fishermen. We have ones that are for mountain bikers. We have some that are for adult travelers and they're looking for like couples getaways. And we just create these great experiences, and we spend the money to do so. And a lot of times, Miles, it ends up being almost as much as you budget for your down payment to purchase a property, you're going to spend on the back end to create these types of experiences. The reason it's so important is because most people are not doing it. And when most people don't do it, if you don't do it, what happens is you just become another commodity. It's really hard to make money as a commodity. And that's what we see a lot in the short-term rental world right now. And a big mistake that new investors are making is they're getting in there, they are excited about it, they jump on, they put this beautiful property on, and they realize, holy crap, I'm the same as everybody else in this market. And it's really hard to differentiate, right? And if it's hard for you to tell the difference, the consumers, the only way they're judging you is, are you cheaper than the next one, right? And we don't want that.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, Shawn, thank you so much. That was awesome advice. It's been great speaking with you.
Awesome, Miles. I appreciate you having me on, man. I always enjoy these conversations. Appreciate you inviting us.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you again for listening to today's Hospitable Hosts podcast episode with Shawn. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And as always, listen out for the next episode dropping real soon. Thanks again.